The life science sector in Scotland has been a tremendous success over the last few years. We've seen the sector go from strength to strength, and we're well on course to exceed our target of having an 8 billion turnover sector in Scotland in the next few years. And the BioQuarter in Edinburgh is absolutely the centre of that strategy. Within BioQuarter already we've seen £500 million of investment from the public sector and another £300 million of investment from partners is in the pipeline. BioQuarter has got the NHS based on site with 2 hospitals. We have the University of Edinburgh with the research and development facilities already on site, and we've got the capacity for several exciting start-up and spin-out businesses already based here. But the plans for the site are much bigger than that. Over the next few years we intend to develop this site across the full size of its scope and potential to include a significant upscaling in the research capability, significantly more space for businesses to locate in and grow, and for residential accommodation on site as well. This isn't just going to be a science park, it's going to be a whole ecosystem, a whole community with people living, working here, studying here, research happening here, and the space for businesses to start up and grow to scale on this site here at BioQuarter in Edinburgh. And I'd really like to invite you to join us as together we build Edinburgh's Health Innovation District.
Good morning, everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. My name's Richard Betts. For those who don't know me, I'm the group publisher at Real Asset Media. Thanks very much to the Scottish Cities Alliance for partnering with us on this really interesting discussion that we've got coming up. Thanks very much to all of the speakers as well, and to you for joining us, and a very happy new year to everybody. We're going to focus a little bit on healthy cities, but particularly within that looking at the biotechnology, life sciences sector, and also how that works both in terms of the city and also the operators and investors. So trying to look at this in the round, really. Adam, maybe let's start with you, just a kind of quick introduction of yourself.
I'm Adam McVey. I'm the leader of Edinburgh City Council, obviously trying to drive forward a lot of innovation right across our city, a huge amount of opportunity, whether it's BioQuarter, Granton, Fountain Bridge, Haymarket, a huge amount of opportunity right across the city, which we're trying to galvanise for the benefit of our residents and connect that in and have an inclusive investment strategy. So very welcome to everyone. Thanks very much for the invitation.
Great, thank you. Chris.
Hi everyone, Chris Walters. I work at JLL. We are a professional services company specialising in real estate. Particularly, I am the investor developer lead for our life sciences group. So that's a dedicated team of professionals at JLL that's based in the UK, but is increasingly also doing stuff across Europe and beyond. So thanks for having us.
Great, super. James.
So I'm James, the head of commercial for Kadans Science Partner. Kadans is probably the largest provider of science and technology space in Europe, at the moment active in several countries across the continent and looking to kind of continue to grow. I think probably their biggest headline stat is we have just over 3 million square feet of laboratory space now across Europe.
Great, thank you. Margaret.
Hi, and Richard, thank you for organising the day, and it's good to have the ability to take Highland here. Highland isn't Edinburgh. We haven't got the extent of health and social care research that's going on there, but we've had it for years. We've had LifeScan here doing really internationally important work around diabetes and the rest. And now we've also had a Centre for Health Science, which has been bringing on professionals and doing research, but now we're on the brink of being ready to ramp up. And the pandemic, on the one hand, it fills you with dread, and it fills you with, when I look at the news reports from London, but at the same time, it has brought us unbelievable opportunities around cooperation and a clearer understanding of what we need. Thank you.
Great, thanks very much. Graham.
My name is Graham Ross. I'm Chief Executive of an architecture and design practice called Austin Smith Lord. I'm based in Glasgow, and we have studios across the UK in London, Bristol, Cardiff, and Liverpool. I've been leading on a range of projects across Scotland and further afield, including current work with Glasgow City Council, looking at developing regeneration frameworks for Glasgow City Centre, working with Strathclyde University within their City Innovation District to develop feasibility studies for the next phase of the Technology and Innovation Centre in the heart of Glasgow. And our practice has also been the architects for the Life Sciences Innovation Centre in Inverness.
And really interesting to be able to pick up on some of those points, I think, Graham, about how you integrate these things within the city as well. And last but not least, Doug, and thank you very much, Doug, for getting up early to join us from the US.
No problem. My name is DouglassCuff. I'm a VP at IQHQ. We are a real estate developer that totally specializes in 100% in life science development. Currently, we have about 4 million square feet of development spread across San Diego, San Francisco, Boston, Cambridge, Massachusetts, and then we're looking to make our entrance into the UK.
Super, thanks very much. Maybe just to start with, Chris, I mean, I don't know whether it's just me. I mean, certainly when we've been following the news, I've been seeing more deals coming through on life sciences, more commentary on life sciences generally. Has there been more of a focus on this in the market, in the investment markets? And I suppose, what are the key trends that you're seeing? Just as an introduction, really.
It's definitely got more interest. So I've been involved with the sector for about 5 years. And I think over the past 12 to 24 months in particular, life sciences has come to stand on its own 2 feet as its own asset class. In particular, over the last year and the tail end of 2020, there was a lot of activity, more products coming to the market, more interest from investors, and not just specialist investors. James and Doug have proven track record in this space, but a number of others who are looking at it for the first time. And I think that will only increase. And I'm sure that this year will be the busiest year yet. We did a survey at JLL middle of last year with our investor group and asked them which sector they felt was going to yield the biggest opportunities over the next 5 years, and life sciences was top of the list. I'm pretty sure it was nowhere near the top of the list the year before. So it shows you sort of that direction of travel. And I think from a trends perspective, in terms of some of the things that are driving it, the war for talent has been and always will be, I think, the most important thing to this sector. It's very much driving occupier decisions. They want to cluster next to like-minded companies, particularly larger corporates and some of the smaller entities. They feed off one another really successfully to create innovation. I'd say another second big trend has been around the convergence of science and technology. Life sciences has a perception of being people in white lab coats doing experiments, whereas actually it's much broader than that. This overlap with technology is really clear to see. And it's clear to see in Scotland, to be honest. And I think the final one has been the growth of venture capital funding, and combining that with public sector funding, you've got this concoction of trends that is understandably driving interest from the mainstream investor market. So all of those things coming together, I think, as I said, it will continue to go from strength to strength. And from my perspective, really excited to see what happens this year. I think it could be a good one for the sector as a whole.
I think it's interesting. And James, obviously, your company in the news relatively recently because of the partnership with AXA. Is that something that you think we're going to see much more of, which is these kind of larger investment platforms beginning to take an increasing interest in this sector?
Absolutely, I think, and it kind of picks up a little bit on Chris's point around, 5 years ago we probably wouldn't be having this conference, let alone having this discussion. And I think, I always describe life sciences very much as the alternative. And it was a kind of sort of slightly strange asset class with a few little players like Kadans in the space, but with the kind of move towards a more knowledge-focused economy and the various aspects of that which are driving not just the UK but wider continental government decisions all the way down to universities and even local councils, you're seeing much more interest in building these kind of ecosystems which go along with science and technology more broadly. And consequently, you see smart money moving into the sector, because it is a long-term sustainable approach. And typically in the life science sector, from a real estate perspective, you hold assets for a lot longer than you would traditionally in a kind of private equity office style environment, for example. So investors like AXA and others are seeing the possibility of staying in this market for much longer and investing in this market much longer. And for us, that's the really important part. You know, we see opportunities from Aberdeen down to Southampton in the UK and across the continent, but we need capital to be able to execute on that. And we found a brilliant partner in AXA who are able to kind of support us in that journey.
I mean, it's really interesting to see how, you know, the amount of just content that's coming through on this has increased even over the last year, I think. Adam, I just wanted to pick up with you. Obviously, Edinburgh Bioquarter, you know, very big development. I suppose from the city's perspective, why do you find that attractive, and what will make it a success for you as a city?
Well, I think it's attractive because it's a frontier industry. It's where the future is. Edinburgh has always, to an extent, been at the forefront of new technology, new industry, innovation, new thinking, and these industries are absolutely no different. They are the future. The reason that capital is moving towards them is capital can see a future in the development and innovation and products and solutions to humanity's problems that can be derived from it. In terms of what Bioquarter has to offer specifically, it's collaboration. There are 13 major organisations or clusters of organisations already at Bioquarter doing fantastic work. We've got the Base Centre, the Usher Institute, all connecting into the city. It's a fairly unique partnership between the university as a centre of excellence and innovation, private industry, and the ability to invest in some of those solutions, those potential solutions, and also the NHS, who are sharing that campus, not just talking about things in academic terms, but actually looking at the practical applications of some of those solutions. So the unique partnership that the Bioquarter has built is absolutely, you know, second to none. And what also has going for it is scale, because as much as there's a huge amount of opportunity and collaboration there right now, there's a huge amount of ability for further investment, further collaboration, and put Edinburgh right at the top of being that data-driven capital of Europe, but also a technology capital of Europe, pulling data and technology together and driving forward the solutions that we need. For Edinburgh, for any city, I think this is an absolute no-brainer. It's not just about the long-term future that these industries and these investments can have for our population and the jobs. And, you know, Bioquarter we've mapped out for the next 50 years, and it will see 50 years of growth throughout all that time. It's not just about that, though. It's about what does the makeup of our economy look like? Does it look like a high-end, inclusive, supportive economy, linking the people who live here, who grew up here, who study here, into those opportunities? Or do we face the chilled winds of capitalism and other kind of unstrategic investment, if you like? We've chosen to put our eggs firmly in the basket of an industry that we have confidence in to deliver opportunities, not just for investors, although I think it provides enormous opportunity for investors, but opportunities for the people of Edinburgh.
Margaret, obviously, as the Highlands Council, very different, in fact, and obviously, you know, I guess these scenarios are played out not just in Scotland, but also in the UK and actually in Europe and around the world, where you've got large urban areas, but also more rural areas with smaller cities. So you're facing completely different challenges. So from your point of view, I suppose, what do you give to potential investors or occupiers who are coming in, and what do you expect back from them, you know, as the Highland Council?
I was listening to Adam there, always interesting, and some of the words he used completely chime with the way we think about it. We just think about it differently, on a different scale. Innovation, that is the attraction here for many, many people, but collaboration, and it's about connecting with the people of the Highlands. This is about jobs and the future, very, very much about that. And that has become very clear to us over the last 6 months as we've enormously improved our relationship with NHS Highland, which is the core element of where we've been moving, and gain better understanding about what all our needs are going to be in the future. I mean, at the top of my list is the health of our population. Second on the list is jobs. And third on the list is some sustainability for the Highlands. I don't want an aluminium factory that's going to go bust on me in 5 years' time. No. We need something that will be built into the Highlands that will yield for the investors, that will yield for the researchers, that will yield for the doctors and nurses that we're training through, and will yield for the communities of Highland. So it's about making the link. And I've never seen a better time. We've got three things happening in Highlands. You've got an increasing population, and you think that's grand, but that completely masks the fact that we've got an aging demographic, a significantly aging demographic, and we're losing our young people because they haven't got the opportunities and the belief in the future and the excitement for jobs. They want to stay in Highland. They tell us that. Get us a house and we'll be fine. And that's for me to sort. But they want to see jobs, and this sector is really exciting. And that's why our city region deal is very much investing in this area. That the Life Science Innovation Centre is absolutely vital to what we're doing. But out there, and sorry, I'm pointing because in my head I'm seeing Sutherland and Caithness and Loch Arbour. Out there, we have the ability, we've been working with our young people around science, about Newton rooms, about making them aware of the possibilities of what are there and sitting waiting for them, and trying to make those connections at every community level. And why on earth should our old people's homes not just be somewhere where you go to bore yourself to death, but actually somewhere where we innovate, we improve their quality of life, we use the projects that we've developed back in the centres, and we build up a social care system which should be leading the country, particularly in rural delivery of social care. I take my holidays mostly in Australia and New Zealand. That's where my family is, and I like to see my grandchild. We go out there. And one day I almost by accident fell over what they're doing in Canterbury in New Zealand. They're leading the world on social care integration. Now I want to take that crown away from them. I want them to be looking at Highland.
Graham, I mean, we've heard here both from Adam, but also then from Margaret in terms of, you know, what the cities are looking for, and lots of things were mentioned there, but collaboration, connection, overall wellness, you know, both socially as you know, as well as the sort of health element of life sciences. When you're looking at a project, how do you tie all those things together? And I suppose, are there examples of things that you've done that try to connect those things?
I mean, as both council leaders have very clearly outlined, the need for collaboration and responding to the existing assets and strengths of the place is fundamental. And I think when you look at the ecosystems in Inverness, in Edinburgh, in Glasgow, where I've been active as well, there are you know, there's a mature and deep-seated level of expertise with respect to the scientific community, the knowledge capital that's there. But there's also an incredible diversity and wealth of riches with regard to the quality of the place, the environment, the setting. So I think having an empathy with and appreciation of the quality of the space, the spirit of the place is fundamental. I think whether we're working on the Life Sciences Innovation Centre in Inverness or working with colleagues at Strathclyde University and others in Glasgow, the ability for the various sectors and parties to show leadership and partnership working, I think, is really fundamental. So that very close collaboration between University of Highlands and Islands, Highlands and Islands Enterprise, the NHS, the local authority and the city deal, fundamental in Inverness. And similarly, working with partners at Scottish Enterprise, Scottish Government, Glasgow City Council and University of Strathclyde, taking forward that Technology and Innovation Centre feasibility and then seeing how that's translating into delivery that all takes leadership, it all takes partnership working, and it takes a clear degree of focus. But I think that I've been very impressed by, in the locations we've been working in across the UK and Scotland in particular, that there is that willingness, there is that political will, but there's also the funding in place with respect to City Deal and other infrastructure to enable these things to happen. I think as well, both council leaders have spoke very clearly about the wider societal benefits and economic diversity benefits of enriching our cities and city regions with by attracting and retaining talent within these regions, and ensuring that those that invest, that locate, and that occupy these spaces and innovate within these spaces enjoy access to a lifestyle and contribute to a quality of life that has a broader impact for the existing communities, as well as those that we're looking to attract and retain within our diverse city economies. So it's very much about a place-based approach and appreciation of the assets, both the human capital and the place qualities that we have, and ensuring that we combine that in a very rich, creative and exciting way. And I think that the work that's coming forward is terrifically exciting for us.
Douglas, obviously in terms of the US, maybe just highlight some of the key trends that are happening there, and whether they're similar or not similar would be interesting to know. And also, does this chime with you in terms of how you've been working with cities like San Diego and those kinds of things? Are US cities looking for the same kind of thing here as Margaret and Adam?
All right, there's a lot to unpack there. So I think first off, when you look at trends in the U.S., I think it's very similar. You know, it is access to talent, what's really kind of driving the whole sector forward. And within the talent, what do they demand? So they demand high quality green buildings with a ton of amenities, and that hasn't changed. Kind of across the markets that we're in. The real estate fundamentals are all still very, very strong, which essentially means high demand, low supply with increasing rents at the end of the day, which is what investors, all are looking for. As far as our projects in San Diego and in Boston, when we try and kind of program a new development coming forward, we look for high quality locations that have kind of a uniqueness to them. So our San Diego project, for instance, is a 5-minute drive to San Diego Airport, 7-minute drive if you hit the one traffic light, which is really unique. It sits right on the water. We're building a restaurant and a museum that overlook the harbor across the street from the Midway, which is a naval museum that was built. It's an aircraft carrier that was built post World War II. And then it has a connection to a train line that goes directly into University of San Diego. So it's all that connectivity, and it connects with downtown and the Gaslamp district. So the new generation of scientists and life science employees, everything is very walkable. You don't really need a car in San Diego, which is very rare. The same thing in Boston with our Fenway Center. This is 900,000 square foot project sitting directly over the Massachusetts Turnpike. So you have the central artery that comes directly in east-west into Boston, but you're not going to need a car because you have not only the commuter rail, but the train line directly sits across Fenway Park. It's going to have an amenity deck on the 6th floor that connects the two buildings. That's going to have everything from yoga to a gym to restaurants with amazing views. It's an 18-story building. So that kind of what we're seeing. And as we work with cities, we go through the planning process, the infamous P word. The idea is we do a lot of listening and try and respond to what is their concerns are, which is green space and green buildings, try and push lab buildings to net zero, which is really, really hard because of the amount of energy that's used to run these buildings, but also to provide green space for artists and musicians and other things like that. So I mean, each market's going to be a little different, but we try and respond to what the local community wants and needs.
Yeah, that's interesting. And Chris, from your point of view, what's your sense of what investors and occupiers are looking for in terms of these locations? I mean, interesting that Doug there is talking about very much integrated within the city, so that it's not a separate science park which is stuck over here kind of thing. What are people looking for?
I think sort of the investors will follow really what's driving the occupiers. So if you start with the occupiers, and we've touched on a few of these already, but talent's obviously there. Support from the public sector is key, in particular in terms of recognising and helping facilitate the growth of life sciences and those types of occupiers and the types of space that they physically need. So Doug mentioned the planning process. You have to go through that when you're bringing forward new space in particular. Some of the other things we haven't touched on specifically, but I think a proximity to academic bodies or research bodies, really getting as close as possible to the brightest minds, so that you can tap into that talent and knowledge to really generate innovation. At the end of the day, create new products and services that can help the population. So I think I'd add to that. I think the infrastructure piece is really key, whether that's sort of hard infrastructure in terms of transport that Doug talked about, or some of the softer infrastructure that you can provide in terms of joint working programs between academic and research bodies, for example, so that you're helping to encourage startup activity. And I think, taking a step back and looking at it from the investor perspective, they are very much following, as I said, what the occupiers are looking for in terms of physical space. But I think the investors are also trying to target a growth sector. They're trying to do that in a lot of cases at scale. And projects like the Edinburgh Bioquarter give investors the ability to do that. Work with a public sector group of bodies, combine that public-private sector expertise, which, as we know, if you get it right, can be extremely successful, and enter this growth market in a very powerful and strong way. And there's different ways you can do that. You can do that on a building by building, a campus by campus, or portfolio level, which is what AXA obviously did when they bought Kadans. So really interesting, as I said right at the beginning, an interesting growth centre, and I think plenty of opportunity from both occupiers and investors alike in that sense.
And James, I suppose the business is obviously active in the Netherlands, as well as Germany and the UK. How do you see the comparatives at the moment? Is the UK a little bit more ahead, or are people looking for the same things wherever they are, in essence?
And Spain, Richard, don't forget Spain. We're right across Europe now as well. So it's a good question. One that we get asked a lot is what do you see as the kind of differences between working in the Netherlands and working in the UK? And there are probably more similarities than there are differences, certainly when you're looking at these kind of knowledge focused businesses. And I think actually in kind of terms of what we look for, the geographies have obviously played a part, but if you kind of zoom out a little bit, we kind of build our methodology from really knowing the occupiers in a local area before we start looking at, that might then end up leading us to Italy. It might end up leading us to Stockholm or the UK or wherever. But understanding where the growth areas are in that market is absolutely critical. And I'll just focus on kind of one area to give you a sort of more real world example. If you look at the cell and gene therapy space, which is a kind of subsector of the sort of wider life sciences market. Now, that space in the UK has been growing and growing and growing over the past decade, really, driven by a number of kind of high profile investors who've put in some cases, hundreds of millions of pounds into companies from Edinburgh down to Oxford. Those businesses have very unique real estate requirements that don't necessarily marry up with a kind of traditional, more medical device, med tech company. So in a kind of top level view, they effectively have three parts to what they want to do. They have their research and development space, they have their quality control space, and then they have their manufacturing space. Now, historically, what has happened is those three parts have gone to three different corners of the globe in various different aspects. But what we're seeing is companies wanting to pull everything together, not necessarily under one roof, but certainly in kind of one location. But those are three very different types of real estate. You have R&D space, which, it's probably what we're all familiar with on this call. It's that kind of very shiny, high-tech laboratory space that, you've seen in Hollywood and everywhere in between, all the way through to the GMP space, which is effectively a glorified industrial unit where the value comes really from the kind of the fit out of that process. Now, companies want all of those different aspects. So you're looking for locations that can accommodate all of those different aspects. And, I personally believe there is still a role to play for science parks in the kind of out of town world for that GMP type space. You have the research and development type space, which is increasingly moving to urban locations for exactly the points that Margaret, Chris, Doug, and Adam and Graham have raised so far. War for talent is critical. And there's a rather tongue-in-cheek phrase I use to describe this, which is scientists are people too. They like nice restaurants, they like nice bars, they like going out and about. They don't just go to work and then go home. They want to enjoy the sort of life that everybody else enjoys. So that urban push is really starting to drive that. But you're not building 100,000 square foot GMP manufacturing space in the middle of Edinburgh. You're building it in a science park outside. So that connectivity piece that Doug mentioned, combined with a variety of kind of real estate requirements that not many places across Europe can actually accommodate that kind of wide variety. You need hospitals, you need universities, you need physical provision, you need transport infrastructure. So from a Kadans perspective, we start at a kind of very macro level, thinking what are these trends in the industry that are going to be with us for the next decade or longer in some cases. And then we start to zoom into, okay, so this XYZ city has these fundamentals, which will be interesting. And then we start to kind of build up what our real estate proposition is in those markets, and then go about kind of acquiring, developing and building real estate. So we come at things from maybe a slightly different angle to some of our peers who look very much more on a kind of geographic basis. We kind of look at the industry and then look at what geographies we can kind of bend into that, if that makes sense.
Very interesting. There's a question also that's just come in from Georgiana. Thanks very much for that, Georgiana, which picks up on the point around green space, social outdoor public realm being a key part of a healthy city in terms of planning. And so how do people see that within healthy cities? So bear that in mind, everybody, and then we'll try to integrate that into the next questions as we come up. But Adam, one thing I just wanted to, so feel free to pick up on that point as well, Adam. But one thing I did want to pick up on was there was a lot of mention there around infrastructure. And obviously we mentioned there Edinburgh Biotech, Bioquarter. So in terms of the infrastructure and the planning to kind of facilitate this kind of project, how much of this is linked to, I suppose, general infrastructure, building that you see as a success for the city as a whole, and how much of it is it linked just to specifically that project? How do you see those two sides of it?
So it's both. It's very much both. So to try and explain that, this is not going to be just a kind of science park, which feels like the outskirts of the city. Homes are an important part of how we keep the space, keep the community aspect animated, and also crucially how we connect in the neighbouring communities to what's going on. Because as much as it's not quite as close to the city centre as some people would want it, actually it's still close to a lot of other communities and amenities that are already in that area. So it is about building that community kind of in its own terms, and making sure that makes sense in a city context. But it's also about connecting that into the wider city and everything that has to offer. So in our transport strategy, for example, a tram extension to Bioquarter is in there. So within and it'll be, I'm not going to second guess other political parties' manifestos, but my guess would be if a political party passed that within our transport strategy, they may well look at their own manifestos for the next council election and take decisions on that. So we are going to have to link in that kind of development quickly and succinctly into the wider network. And to put a tram extension into context, that would be a direct connection to university, to the airport, to the docks, to the city centre and everything that Edinburgh city centre has to offer. So it's about connecting everything in as part of the whole sum total to everything that the city is, and also about taking it and making sense of it on its own terms. And actually the housing aspect, to kind of follow on what someone had said about residential, housing is under enormous pressure in Edinburgh. So it's good for the city to have investment in housing, and it's going to take us a long time and a lot of investment to catch up with that level of demand and growth that we've seen for the last 20, 30 years, and we've really needed to move a heck of a lot faster. So as we move faster with our build programme, there's a huge amount of opportunity and a huge amount of certainty for investors in that space. And again, it's good for the city to have that supply. And on the green city and healthy ecosystem of a city, I completely agree. Edinburgh we have the very fortunate accolade of being the greenest city in the UK. That's because within ourselves, we have an enormous amount of parks. We have enormous green connected with blue spaces. So the cycle networks, for example, are connected in through the water of Leith and other things, so people can go for a walk literally in their lunch hour, or walk to work through these spaces, and it literally feels like you're going on a country walk right in the heart of our capital city. So there's an enormous amount going for Edinburgh in terms of the well-being aspect to the trees and green space that we have and are protecting. And we're looking to expand that even further. The cycleways and off-road cycleways are expanding. The green space and investment in parks are continuing so that amenity is there on people's doorstep. We take it very seriously in Edinburgh. You only need to check any Edinburgh social media account to see how seriously we take our green space, our trees, and our parks.
That's interesting. And Graham, maybe just pick up that point for Georgiana in terms of the green space. How important is that for the kind of master plan aspect?
It's absolutely fundamental, Richard. And the work that we're looking at in Glasgow, which in many respects is echoed in other cities across Scotland and elsewhere, is very much embedding that green agenda and greening the city and a healthy urbanism with the broader socio and economic issues that have been touched upon in the call thus far. And obviously Glasgow's due to host COP26, the UN's Climate Change Conference. And so we will never have a better opportunity to utilise this moment in time to reinforce the broader societal benefits of access to green infrastructure, blue infrastructure, as Adam's been referring to. So the Your City Centre district regeneration frameworks that we're progressing is very much embedding that existing green infrastructure that surrounds the city centre and weaving that into the city, capitalising on the work that is coming forward with the Avenues project, where £115 million worth of investment is going into completely redesign streets to completely balance the utilisation of space so that we promote active travel, so that we're encouraging more walking, wheeling and cycling, and essentially so that we create an urban environment which has got cleaner air, that's got better biodiversity, that encourages more activity, and thereby encouraging greater activity amongst folk in the city, and acting therefore as preventative spend with regard to population health. I mean, clearly, if we can embed the science and ingenuity that's been discussed with regards to life sciences within that rich mix of a mixed-use city centre, then all well and good. And the proposition in Glasgow is about doubling the city centre population, increasing from 20 to 40,000 people in the next 10 years. So we need to embed not only the amenities that Adam's referred to, but also the health and social care amenities that Margaret touched upon. And that's exactly the proactive approach that we're taking, so that when Douglas or others come forward with propositions to lock into that mixed-use city centre proposition, there's a very clear sense of what should go where and why. And the health benefits of access to nature are well known. Indeed, the kind of notion of a natural health service as well as a national health service is crucial, I think, in terms of future urban planning and helping us not only to achieve a healthier environment, but also one that achieves that net zero ambition that all cities have.
Margaret, I want to come to you and just pick up on, I know that Graham's been working on Inverness, and I know that, I think if I read correctly in the press that that it has gone through planning now. I think the Life Sciences Innovation Centre at Inverness.
It did have some problems, but it's now through. Thank the Lord. Let's get on with it.
And how important do you see that? I suppose what for particularly for the Highlands.
It's really important. But what we've got to do now is grab back the vision that we had when we started this, when we started the city region deal in particular, there's a huge section in there. Transport Scotland came along and said, right, we're going to do an East Link for you. We said, great. So I think they thought they were doing almost a flyover, you know, get past Inverness, go south, go north. No, we said, we want to take this apart and put it back together again so that it's actually a distributor road, so that we can build houses and schools and more life science centres off it. And that is exactly what we're doing. And we did persuade them to do that. So it is about bending the big public spends and bending the ideas of years. And I want to capture back that vision, but this time I don't want it just to be the vision of the planners and some of the city councillors and some of the people that are helping us define that vision. I want it to be a vision for the Highlands. I want them to understand this is about their futures, the futures of their communities, hanging on to many more of their young people, because people are not going to give up flying. They will get back to the place where they are flying. There'll be less of it, but they're going to. It's going to be the world will be back connected. And again, mercifully, Inverness Airport is 4 or 5 miles away from the from where we've got the life science buildings. So it's fine. But it is about reconnecting that vision for everyone. It's about getting you guys to help us do that. It's not just about real estate. It's about selling the future. If you want to be part of that future, help us build it. And it's about making it work for the small places as well as the big places. So the digital connectivity is absolutely vital, and that's been a huge fight on the edge, as you can imagine. But hallelujah, BT has finally got its contract, got out of the courts, and we're now ready to fly. And it's amazing what people have done in the interim. I sit on wireless broadband myself, and by and large it gets us through. But we're now looking at super fibre. We've got city fibre in the town, and they're digging up our pavements. And frankly, I don't care. We'll deal with it when they're finished. Because it's a huge opportunity for us. So it's about this move into the future, but to get everyone on the same place, so that if you guys are up and talking about a new building, everybody knows, everyone's encouraging it, everyone's saying, how is this going to link into our care home in Golspie? How are we going to use that as a centre for well-being and health, and not just a nursing home? And I think there are massive opportunities here. I don't think we've even scratched the surface. So come and give us a hand thinking into the future.
And Doug, I just wanted to come to you and just bring it back to the investment side for a moment, which is looking at Europe. What's the perspective of US capital looking at opportunities in Europe at the moment?
IQHQ has just, over the last 18 months or so, we've raised $2.4 billion for our platform. And the last round, which is 1.7, has an interest in, going into the UK. At this point, so the biggest difference from where I sit between the UK and the US is scale. Obviously, the country is 5 times the size, and so we're looking for opportunities where you can scale. So there is an appetite to come over. I think as far as the rest of Europe goes, James could probably speak better to it because his company is spread more across it. But we would, I've been, spent most of my career kind of following what's been going on in Europe. And I think, between Germany and the Netherlands, Spain and France, I think, those are what I would say potential hotbeds of innovation and academic excellence.
Okay, good. A question just come in from Dave Brown as well. Thanks very much for that, Dave, which is, how are the investors accommodating social impact priorities into their long-term investment decisions? And are the costs or resources needed to facilitate these built into the calculations? So I don't know, maybe if you just start with that, Doug, and then I'll come to you, James, as well on that. And Chris, if you've got any views, also useful.
Yeah, so I would say, Chris talked about how there's a huge opportunity. So, with big reward comes big risk. And to build a life science building is not inexpensive by any stretch of the imagination. It's way more than a house or a school or an office or an industrial shed. And so I think capital looks for groups and people that are experts in it. And for us, the trick when you design a building, a lab building particularly, is really it's not the first tenant where you actually kind of make your returns. It's the second tenant and the third tenant and the fourth tenant as the space rolls and as these companies grow. So if you do it correctly, you won't have to reinvest into the building multiple times, which is what's really key. Versus like an office, someone comes in and each occupier is going to want to make the office their own, and then you have to recapitalize and spend more money into that. While a lab building, a biology lab in San Diego is just like a biology lab in Boston or Cambridge or Oxford or Edinburgh for that matter. So I think that's where it gets tricky. But when you get it wrong, it can go way wrong and be very painful on the P&L. So I think with capital partners that are looking to invest in the space are looking for high quality groups like Kadans and like IQHQ. I mean, our team has over 135 years experience in the sector. I've spent my entire career in the sector, and I'm there are people that have more experience than I do on our staff. So I think that's really how capital is trying to find those right partners and then help them execute.
Okay, good. And James, just picking up that point there from Dave.
We as kind of science and technology real estate professionals have a bit of a responsibility, really, in that science has always been viewed as kind of up on its ivory tower and often done behind big barbed wire fences that were inaccessible to anybody, really, let alone kind of normal people on the street. And we definitely have a responsibility to change that. And security is important, but if we can design buildings that have open ground floors, and that's very much the kind of methodology that Kadans uses, is that pretty much when we design large buildings, all of our ground floors are open to the public. And actually what we see is the companies and the occupiers respond really well to this, and we leverage a lot of what they do in terms of kind of social impact and partnering with our tenants to go out and actually, whether it be mentoring schemes in local schools or otherwise, to bring that in. And we facilitate very much on the kind of design front to give them the spaces to be able to do that. And I think science has a massive impact. And if you look at STEM, so science, technology, engineering, and maths more broadly, we have the opportunity to influence the kind of next generation, and that could be through, as I said, mentoring programs or otherwise. And that's, I think there's often a misconception that jobs in science as well are for people with PhDs, and I think it was Chris that referred to the kind of historic perception of people in white lab coats. Science brings people from all walks of life and all different parts of the educational spectrum, and we need to make sure that we are facilitating buildings where people want to work. And then obviously from a kind of ESG perspective, we're constantly trying to move the needle on the environmental impact of our buildings, which Doug alluded to is difficult, as they have kind of high power requirements and various other pieces as well. We try and factor in budgets for various different simple things like electric vehicle charging points, solar panels. All of this kind of gets factored into our budgeting and our costing when we're designing and building new centres. But it's not easy in science, and there is no getting away from that.
I wanted to kind of end on where we saw the biggest opportunity, and whether that's I suppose as a transformational for a city, whether it's investment opportunities. You can choose how you answer that question, but what are the biggest opportunities that we see this, given that we're all looking for something optimistic, I think, at the start of 2021. Maybe let's start with you, Adam. Where do you see the biggest opportunities?
Biggest opportunities are for the people that live here, and the people that want to live here. Edinburgh is a city that's a relatively easy sell for anyone that's visited, in terms of people moving here, living here, working here, studying here. A lot of people who study here go on to live here, work here, build their careers and lives here. There's a huge amount of opportunity to build a really exciting future industry, which is crucial to dealing with some of the long-term problems that the entire world is grappling with, of aging population and all the challenges of healthcare that we face. And Margaret talked about them very well earlier in terms of some of the things being worked on in the Highland as well. Those opportunities are absolutely huge, not just for ourselves and building those careers, building those lives in future, but also building a real legacy of the earth. Edinburgh is proud of the contribution we've made to the world and the Enlightenment and a whole host of innovations that Edinburgh has birthed. We're a city of literature, we're a city of innovation, and we want to share what originates here. So it's an opportunity, I think, to really make a positive impact, not just for ourselves, but for the world.
Okay, good. James?
For me, I think it's certainly looking at the UK, the two of the bigger landowners in the UK are the NHS and universities. And coincidentally, they are the locations where the tenants that I work with on a daily basis want to be based. So for me, what I really want to see in 2021 and beyond, in fact, is a more considered approach from universities and the NHS in unlocking those huge banks of land which are prime for redevelopment or renovating in some cases, to allow access to, okay, maybe not just the private sector, but the public sector as well, to really reinvigorate some of these hospital campuses, university campuses, give them a kind of commercial focal point and the various positives that go along with that. So I kind of want to see a more considered approach from the broader, and I use the term very warily, the broader public sector in bringing on board kind of private sector partners to deliver new, exciting innovation centres across the UK.
Okay, great. Margaret?
I would say to the folks here today, think about scale. Yes, we can bring you the need for some big buildings, but we can bring you lots more need for something not quite that big for being elsewhere. But I'll tell you, just my final words is, I asked for someone to take a look at LifeScan, saying, how are you guys doing? They're doing fine. Their vision is the one that I actually love. They said they've got a vision to create a world without limits for people with disabilities and related conditions. And I thought, oh, that's good. So I've got a vision for creating a world without limits for our young people, for our old people, and to build the communities of Highland. And we want to welcome people in. We have people coming here to retire, to live because they feel it's a safe place. I want people to come here because they think it's an exciting place and a place where we've got life science threaded throughout everything we do.
Great, thanks very much. Graham?
In the work that we've been doing locally here in Glasgow, I think the opportunity, echoing in some of the remarks that have been made, is to really supercharge the agenda of health and well-being in terms of placemaking, in terms of urbanism, in terms of healthy buildings, and overlay that with the response to the climate emergency in a way which gives us a great degree of focus, but also a great degree of creative opportunity to innovate in the way in which we place mend, how we retrofit and repurpose the campuses and of the universities and hospitals that James spoke about a moment ago, and how we embed them and integrate them in a far more purposeful, rich and inspiring way to create the ecosystem, the setting to enable that collaboration, that collaborative research environment that colleagues have spoken about, but also to ensure that that activity works in a way which there's thereby a halo effect. There's that broader benefit for the communities, as Adam said earlier on, that live in and around our cities and city centres. And so therefore I see that the rich mix that Douglas and others have spoken about of integrating innovation districts, science, the creative economy, and playing to the strengths and the assets that we have in terms of the people as well as the places within our cities. I think that the fusion of what's been discussed today could create a very dynamic, exciting, vibrant and inspiring place, and the sort of place where, as James said a moment ago, a range of folk from across society can be inspired, engaged, and we can foster those citizen scientists and those scientists of the future.
I've had a sneaky question come in right at the end for you, Douglas. So I'll come to you for your opportunities, but also if you can touch on this briefly as well. In light of your experience in the life sciences sector, how lower would you estimate CapEx and other leasing costs compared to offices? And also what percentage of life science development projects are built to suit compared to spec?
Again, a lot to unpack. So I would say right now, our 4 million square foot portfolio I talked about, that's all being done spec right now. So the appetite in the US is very strong. There's something in Boston, for instance, there's something like 5 million square feet speculative development kind of spread throughout across the market. So the appetite, as I go back to my original statement, the real estate fundamentals are still very strong, which is what's driving that. As far as costs go, I would defer you to your favorite quantity surveyor to get the actual percentages correct. But in very broad strokes, depending on the size, scale, and nature and use of the building, I would guesstimate, the shell and core would be about 40% more expensive to build, and the tenant fit up, depending on how you want to design it, could range, anywhere from 60 to double, as far, depending how far you want to take it and how many lab services you would want to provide. And as far as the opportunity goes, I think the UK particularly is really ripe for kind of a life science explosion, in the sense that you look at the access, the race for talent in the US has gotten so competitive, and the colliding technologies between tech and life sciences is ever more present, that there has to be a relief valve somewhere, which I think England and Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland provide. And I think you go back to 2016, that it was ready then, and then Brexit kind of changed the goalposts, and now that that's settled, unfortunately we got hit with COVID, which then also kind of disrupted things again. But I think as we come out of this, and as we hopefully have a logical phase out of COVID into a more normalized world, you'll see more and more kind of US occupiers looking over. You've already seen it a little bit, with groups like Illumina with their big expansion in Cambridge, and there's a reason why AstraZeneca stayed in England and went to Cambridge and didn't go to Gaithersburg or to Sweden. They stayed in England. So I think that the sector as a whole is primed for some serious growth.
Great, thank you. And last words to you, Chris.
So I think definitely in terms of biggest opportunities, I think there's opportunities across the whole of Scotland and the rest of the UK and beyond. It's just a question of scale, as Margaret said, depending on whether you're looking at individual buildings, campuses, or bigger portfolios. I think there's a big opportunity for the public sector to continue to facilitate that growth, whether you're central government, local government, or some of the other public sector bodies that James mentioned, like the NHS and universities, etc. And then the final thing is, I think there's an opportunity for investors and developers to lead by example. We talked about ESG in terms of demonstrating to the public and the other industries that they are committed to having a positive impact in terms of environmental and social perspectives is really important. And from a JLL perspective, as an advisor to those types of clients, we're taking it really seriously. Our head of our chief executive for EMEA recently took up a new role as the global head of sustainability services and ESG. So it's something as a business we're taking very seriously. And I think, as I said, there's a big opportunity to lead from the front there, particularly in a space which could cure diseases and really make an impact on society. So plenty of opportunity across the board, I think.
Okay, brilliant. One last thing that's just come in, sneaking in under the wire, is from Dill. Thank you, Dill Keller. Given the high barriers to entry into life sciences as an investment, how would you recommend, or do you have any ideas on how mid-size investment managers can get exposure to this growing asset class?
I think the starting point has to be really getting under the skin of the market and understand what's driving it. So we talked right at the beginning about some of those trends and what's driving decisions by occupiers. The breadth of the life sciences universe is really broad, and it could be, a simple office need for digital health occupiers, for example, or some specialist wet lab or biology space that's needed for drug discovery or pharmaceuticals. So I think understanding your local market and where you think that occupier demand will come from, because as Doug said, if you build the wrong stuff in this sector, it can be extremely costly and extremely damaging from an investment perspective. So in short, I suppose, do your homework to some extent in terms of where that growth potential can come from, and try and mitigate some of those risks from a developer and investment perspective.
Thanks very much for joining us. Really, really interesting discussion there. What it tells me is that we need to do another one on these fairly soon, just because there's a whole series of questions that I didn't get to and things that I'm really interested in exploring more about this particular sector, and also how that links in with the cities as well. Thanks very much for joining us, whether that was via Zoom, through the webinar, or through the RealX platform. Thank you for all of your questions. I'm going to leave you now with just a highlight of the of Inverness, what's happening there. Thanks very much for joining us, and look forward to seeing you at the next one. And thank you also to the Scottish Cities for partnering on this, as well as the other series of events. Thanks very much, everybody.